Hello and welcome back to our next panel. We are taking things up a notch. It's 3 p.m. on a Saturday, and what more could you want than talking about something absolutely horrific? Because hey, that's the vibe for the day. Our panel today is originally it was titled "Are We Fucked Up?" but YouTube said I couldn't have that, so I changed it to "Are We Messed Up?" Same kind of thing, but I think for the sake of us being in the room, we'll say, are we fucked up? That's today's question. As I mentioned earlier in one of our panels, I feel like we're probably an easy answer to that already, the fact that we're here. But hey, look, if you're in the comments on YouTube, you tell us what you think. Are we completely disturbed? We will be looking at disturbing films to ruin your day. So tomorrow is Sunday. Hopefully we'll come away with some recommendations so you can suitably have, one of the bleakest, most depressing Sundays of your life, because that is truly how the day of rest should go down. So let's get into it. I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves before we get into our questions. So I'm going to kick things off and I'm going to ask you, Amber, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. So glad to be back with the Ghouls. It was too long without us all together. I am staff writer and work on the news team over at Fangoria magazine. You can also find my work on a lot of boutique labels such as Arrow Video, Second Sight Films, Radiance Films, Umbrella Entertainment, Vinegar Syndrome, Era 4444, TerraVision, all kinds of places out there, and mostly talking about weird, gross, or fucked up movies. So, yay.
Absolutely. And you can also hear Amber and me talk about the coffee table and be absolutely degenerate human beings laughing at what is one of the most horrible things committed to film, So absolutely. Bruna, what about you?
Is a bit spotty. Sorry about that. My name's Bruna Aru. I'm part of the Dead Duck Film Club, so we do showings of different foreign cult films in Nottingham and reading around horror films, specifically disturbing horror films. It's kind of what I've become known for within my friend group, to bring up things that ruin everyone's day.
Thank you, Bruna. Your internet is a little bit
that's
laggy.
me.
Thank you, Bruna. Sorry, I think your internet is lagging just a little bit, but we'll see how we go. We'll try to get through. I know nothing more worse than when the Wi-Fi is like, "Oh, you've got something to do today." I'm gonna ruin that for you. But thank you, Bruna. Yes, you are part of Dead Duck Film Club, where you recently had a day of new French Extremity films, which I was meant to come along to, but unfortunately I was not feeling too well that weekend. But I heard it went down a treat. Isabel, what about you?
Hi, so I run Culture Film Publication, which is like a UK film publication for cult films of many different subgenres and generally obscure and underseen filmmaking. But I personally love horror, so there's a lot of horror content on there. Um, and I love a good disturbing film. And, body horror, vampire horror, French extremity, all that stuff is, yeah, my sort of thing. So, yeah, very happy to be here.
Yeah, I think it was one of the first things we bonded over, actually, wasn't it, when we were at Fright Fest, being like, oh, let's share some horrible recommendations together.
Yeah, I
Cool.
remember that was really fun.
Thank you very much. What about you, Vanna?
Hi, yeah, oh man, I don't know. I haven't done this in such a long time. I am a staff writer for Movie John as well as an editor. I have been in Fangoria. I also have had my first physical release with Second Sight on Pearl. And then I also wrote my master's thesis on rape revenge films, so that's kind of how I got into all of this. And if anyone is interested in reading a lot of academic jargon on the subject, I can always share that with people. But yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, Fana. And it's never jargon. It's always very well written, very eloquent. So it's never jargon. It's always a fantastic read. And last but not least, what about yourself, Frankie?
Hello, my name's Frankie. I'm a very new ghoul. I just joined on the relaunch. So I'm just here for the ride. I'm very happy to be here.
Very happy to have you. Yes, you have recently joined Ghouls. We've got a lot of new faces. You came highly recommended from our editor, Becky. So very happy to have you. So let's start talking about some horrible, horrible things. The reason that I wanted to put this panel together was not only because obviously I am a huge extreme cinema fan myself and will traumatize anyone that will listen. But I think recently there's been a trend in more disturbing, lots of people pushing disturbing films, which we will come into a bit more detail. In many ways, I'm very grateful for the push on more extreme, but you know, I think it can be a double-edged sword. But my first kind of question is, I want to know a bit more about what it is about kind of just extreme cinema slash disturbing films that we feel like makes us so obsessed with them. And I'm gonna throw that question first over to yourself, Fana.
Yeah, isn't that I would really love to know why why I'm like this. I don't know. I think obviously, I mean, to some extent, catharsis is usually something that kind of begins the, cascade with like the tip of the iceberg, and then I'm definitely someone that found myself just continuing, like chasing that feeling. I think I am very unfortunately desensitized to a lot. And so I'm always kind of searching for something to make me feel something. um, I also think like it's kind of like it's like a forbidden fruit kind of thing. I think that's because I shouldn't watch it, I will. Um, and then I guess something I was kind of thinking about when I was doing my thesis was uh, not that I'm like the biggest Freud fan, but I think if you consider the death drive, I think there's kind of like a way that we sublimate those kinds of feelings through film. We actually had a big discussion about how Jackass and like that kind of film series is a way for a lot of people to um, satisfy that death drive by like watching public, because we used to have public executions and things like that, and because that's not a thing now, we have it in another form. Again, don't always trust everything Freud says, so you can always take that with a grain of salt, but I think that's a very interesting conversation, especially with the way the world is right now.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned Jackass actually, because we were in the Ghouls chat the other day, very excited firstly that it's making a resurgence, but I think it kind of pulls on the era, right, where you had like things like Jackass, where that was very much, then you had things like Two Girls One Cup, and it was like this internet era of things that were absolutely horrific, that we were all like, oh, morbid curiosity got the better of us. Yeah, very excited for Jackass to come back and for us to watch people hurt themselves, because why not, right? Frankie, what would you say? Why do you think disturbing movies kind of make us so obsessed?
I think, or from my own experience anyway, trauma and life events and the way of the world. I think when things are feeling really shitty for yourself, it helps to watch something fictional, someone else in a much worse situation than you are.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's actually been a bit of a theme for for the day, is kind of seeing that this catharsis, right, comes out of watching not only horror, but maybe especially for us, if we're fans of the more extreme, watching those kind of like very depressed. I mean, I mentioned earlier that I recently watched Threads, and I was like, that's truly where we are at the moment, right?
Yeah, it's so relatable. It's scary. I think something that starts for a lot of people as a bit of a morbid curiosity actually becomes more relevant and relatable than we initially think it will be.
Absolutely. And it's sad that again, I've said this, I felt like I said this quite a few times, and it's sad that that's kind of the state of the world, but thank God we have, you know, these films as that kind of catharsis and an outlet. Issy, what about you?
I agree. I think there's kind of that morbid curiosity that a lot of people have, but I think for me, I kind of think that with the state of the world at the moment, when you're watching something like Threads, like you mentioned, I mean, at the time that was pretty horrific because it felt possible and, you know, kind of real to people, that threat was genuinely there of like nuclear war, and it's pretty horrifying. And I think that when you have some extreme films, especially that deal with a lot of political issues, like with a lot of the French extreme films and things like that, it's um, an interesting place to kind of express all those anxieties. And a lot of people experiencing those anxieties about things like politics will then kind of feel a sort of camaraderie in the sense that someone else is worried and they've made a film about it, and then you're watching it and you're going, oh, I feel that way as well. And so I think it's kind of a bonding, like all film really. I think it's a shared experience and shared anxieties that can kind of make us feel a bit more okay. So if it's extreme filmmaking or disturbing filmmaking that deals with kind of social themes and political themes especially, then that's a huge factor that would attract a lot of people. But also just morbid curiosity, I think. I think that's a very human thing to experience. A lot of people are just like, oh, this has got this thing in it and that sounds really weird, so I kind of want to check it out, you know. So I think there's it's a different flavor for everyone, but I think personally for me, I enjoy the stuff that carries with it a lot of social commentary.
Yeah, and I think social commentary is really important for extreme cinema. I mean, we've had a few comments already of people mentioning Sallow, which is of course a film that, you know, is steeped in cultural and historical importance, and, you know, has had, I mean, lots of people talking about it recently. Now, I've actually got a copy right here with me that I got sent the other day from the BFI, and that's, you know, a film that is, I guess, very representative of how we are now. Amber, what about you?
Did you know they're remaking Threads, by the way? Because we need that
Oh my god.
apparently right now. Which
Please,
is
God,
a
no.
little on the nose, if you ask me. Yeah, no, I agree with what everyone else is. I think, you know, that we know of, human beings are really the only species that have this kind of innate knowledge of our own mortality from a kind of philosophical and spiritual viewpoint. You know, other animals know that they're going to die, but we know it from birth, basically, that that's going to happen to us one day. So I think, you know, whether we want to admit it or not, human beings are inherently fascinated with morbidity and mortality and death. You know, look at true crime culture. That just proves it. A lot of people want to shit on disturbing films, but are then going on Netflix and watching the latest true crime documentary. I'm like, well, they're two sides of the same coin. But I think in our community as well, a lot of us being of the same age, we come from this era. Our formative years were on the internet, when the internet was the Wild West back in the day. We didn't have any of these safeguarding tools on there. You know, you'd come home from school and you'd go on like Live Leak or Ogrish and you'd watch like a live beheading of someone and be like, yeah, okay, cool, now go about my day. And so we've, unfortunately, a lot of people our age have been desensitized to what we consider extreme. And I know for me personally, I'm always looking for something in film to push my boundaries, because I want film to be an emotive experience. You know, I want to come away from a film feeling moved in some way, either feeling great or more likely, which I prefer, feeling like shit. But the problem with that is, you know, the further you push your boundaries, the harder it is to be affected by something. So you're always chasing that next high, or, you know, next low, as it were. And it becomes addictive in a way. And you do see a lot of people get like addicted to this extreme horror space to the point where they just can't watch anything like Blumhousey anymore, because they're like, this means nothing to me. I'm not quite there yet. I still love a Blumhouse now and then, you know.
Yeah, and it's a good point about kind of like chasing that high and that warmth and more, because you know, when I was at university, I did my dissertation on desensitization through watching, you know, violence in extreme films, and I was very much at a point in my life where I was like, you know, up at like 2 a.m. Googling every night, what is the most extreme, worst, nastiest, like I couldn't get enough. I think I've softened a little bit in my older years, and I'm like, do you know what? Right. And you're like, I could just watch a nice film. I could just watch like something that's actually not too depressing. But it does become quite addictive to see like how you can push that personal boundary, which is, I mean, I think that's the fun of it, to be honest with you. Bruna, I know you're having some tech difficulties, but let's see if we can, if your Wi-Fi is going to push through. Why do you think we're so obsessed with, you know, disturbing content?
I am so sorry about that. It's the one time you need it to work, it never works. That's how it always is. Weirdly enough, I also did my dissertation on extreme horror films. I think we can all relate to that. I think there's something specifically when you're female presenting, or when you grew up, you know, as a woman, there is something very liberating about being allowed to explore those fears that we're also familiar with in a safe space. Of being you're so used to hearing about all the horrible things that happen to people like you and to your friends and everything, and of being told that the only way to keep yourself safe is to make yourself less and less, and to, you know, cover up more, don't make a big thing, be less of yourself. And I feel like a lot of these extreme films really give a space to just kind of go crazy in a safe way, and to just explore all of those things that we have, that we're usually told are ugly and that we shouldn't have. I think it's important, especially, you know, as women and as queer people, to be able to have those spaces where you can do that without being judged, which is why I think that extreme films like this are so important, but also why so many of the big audiences around these films are women and are queer people. I think we're always told to just be in our little corners and to not make a fuss. But what's more satisfying than to just cover yourself in blood and go fucking crazy?
Isn't that that's exactly what we're here for, and that's exactly what we want. And I love that you kind of mentioned, you know, around safe spaces, because I think, you know, for me, my reason of kind of getting into extreme was after my mum passed away. I was like, I need to feel something, and extreme cinema became a very, you know, cathartic way to do that. And I think, you know, and it might come out of, you know, some of our further questions, but, you know, rape revenge, for instance, a lot of people find a lot of catharsis in that. Obviously, it's, you know, it can be a very heavy topic and a difficult kind of subgenre to you know, watch and get into. But as you said, you know, it can help us to kind of feel represented and get that catharsis. So as I mentioned at the beginning, there's been a boom. Around extreme films. I think it probably kicked off maybe a couple of years ago. I think there was people sharing Megan is missing on TikTok without knowing what Megan is missing is, and the world went a bit mad. Which, I mean, to be fair, if you've seen Megan is missing, and then you see people that had no idea and went and found it, you probably understand why everyone lost their fucking shit over it. Why do you think disturbing films and this, you know, push for this is the most disturbing thing ever has risen in so much popularity over kind of, you know, the last maybe like five years. And I'm going to ask you first, Amber.
Yeah, touching on, you know, what we've spoken about a bit, I think the world is in a very, very, very dark place right now. And I think a lot of people are looking, like, as they always have done, to cinema as an outlet. So sometimes when everything is shit, you do want that hopeful, like, la la la, lovey dovey. But I find more often than not, like, you do want to watch something that reflects those dark and angry feelings and kind of materializes them in a safe fictional space where we can see violence that doesn't actually have consequences and kind of let those feelings out. But I also think, particularly now, there's a feeling of like sanitization that a lot of us are sick of, especially in the mainstream like movie scene, where these big studios have clocked that familiarity and safety are what sells. So that's why you're getting all these sequels to movies we watched as kids, like are just blatant like cash grabs. You know, everything is kind of watered down and softened so it can appeal to this sense of like nostalgia and going back again to those places where the world wasn't so scary. We just got out of the height of a pandemic. I'm not going to say we got out of it entirely because it's still around, but that was a time when we were really encouraged to keep this disconnect from our own, between ourselves and our own bodies and other people's bodies and humanity as a whole. And I think coming out of that on the other side, you know, people are just really craving that viscerality, you know, that blood, the guts, the gore, the filth of like being a human being. We just want to feel something again. And I think extreme horror and, you know, disturbing movies are a way, you know, you get the kids on TikTok, like the extreme movie Iceberg, they want to do it. They want to dip their toes into that and, you know, feel something again. Cause I think they're sick of being pandered to, like their children. Cause, you know, aside from actual children, they can handle more than they, I'm not saying like you should have your 2-year-old watch Salo, but I'm saying,
hey, look.
people can handle more than they think they can, and I think it's often a very good idea to actually push your boundaries and stretch yourself, because you learn things about yourself and you learn things about the state of the world rather than staying in your own little like Disney MCU bubble.
I love that we've mentioned Disney and MCU on nearly every panel, and you can tell we're pushing an agenda. But you're very right. You know, lots of films have become quite sanitized. You know, we've seen over the last few years, you know, sex almost being stripped out of many movies, and it's like, come on, like we're adults, we want this. You know, that's the type of shit we want to see. Issy, what about you? Why do you think disturbing is kind of on the rise?
I think it's a combination of many factors. I think the internet is such a huge factor, like you guys mentioned earlier. I'm a bit after your generation, so I don't think it was as bad for mine. I've steered clear of lots of the kind of live leak stuff because I'm like aware of it and I'm like, I'm good actually. But I'm aware that even with like platforms, you know, you have places like X stripping all their community guidelines because of, you know, free speech and stuff, which whether you think that's right or wrong, it's completely exposing these generations, especially younger people, to loads of content that they probably either don't want to see or will affect them and their sensitivity. And then also with the political state of the world right now, everything seems so dire. And you mentioned like Salo earlier. That film is, of course, I think lots of people, especially in this sort of group, would think that movie's probably a masterpiece. I do. You know, horrible to watch, but so powerful and poignant and impactful, and people disregarding work like that because it's just pretty awful and horrible in its content, I think would probably benefit from it more if they kind of gave it a chance and thought about it a bit deeper. I think that sometimes, I don't think we can blame people really, because if you're watching something that's quite shocking, it might be then hard to try and think about something a little bit more critically because they might be a bit stunned by that sort of content. So I don't particularly think, oh, you know, that person just doesn't get it. It's like, no, it's probably quite difficult if you've not been exposed to that sort of content to then be able to kind of put a critic's hat on and think about it in that sort of way. But I think, yeah, with the state of politics at the moment, I mean, it's kind of always going round in circles, it seems, over time, because we have films like Solo from quite a while ago, and then you have, French Extremity were very political films in the early noughties, talking about fascism. And so I think that now, with the combinations of things like the internet and the state of politics, I think there's a huge resurgence of interest, especially from like my generation now, like Gen Z and everything. It's we're all kind of experiencing this for the first time because we didn't grow up being very conscious of it. And so a lot of people, on TikTok that are my age are then like, oh, yeah, you got to watch this crazy, disturbing movie. Because I think with the pandemic and then with politics, everyone is so affected and wants to kind of feel connected to the world through that sort of thing.
Well, and like you said, it really does actually kind of connect you with the world. Again, mentioning New French Extremity, I think, before I'd delved into that side of things, I didn't really know about, French politics or anything like that. I think there's other films that you look at, kind of like Trauma, which is from, I think it's South American film, and that talks a lot again about politics. Obviously a Serbian film, like it's quite a good way to almost understand the political landscape of other countries and what they're feeling. Bruna, what about you? Why do you think disturbing is on the up? Not sure if you can hear us, Bruna. All right, I think your internet might be playing games again. So I'm gonna throw it over to you, Frankie. What's your thoughts on the rising popularity of disturbing films?
Sort of piggybacking on everyone else's answer, to be honest. I think it is really that safe outlet for the real world anxieties and uncertainty with the way that everything is, politically and in life. And I think people sort of crave that deeper sort of psychological involvement and the immersion that I think is quite different that you get from extreme and disturbing movies. It sort of, I think, goes along with the rise in sort of in-person horror attractions becoming more popular. I think they sort of go hand in hand.
Yeah, it does go very hand in hand, and it's, I guess as well, these things become quite personal. I think, as we feel the effects of things, and as we kind of learn more, it kind of takes a bit of a personal toll, doesn't it, on us, and kind of how we're feeling about it.
Yeah, I think so. And I think having something to be able to immerse yourself in that the entire time, again, same with in-person horror experiences and with disturbing movies, the entire time that you're not in danger, you're in a safe place. It's sort of a way to let out all of those inner feelings that you might be scared to think too deeply into any other time.
Let's all just get together and have a big watch party of a Serbian film and Salo. That's the dream. That's how we can get through the trying times of today and where we're at. And Vanna, what about you? Why do you think we've got this rise in extreme?
I mean, everyone's kind of really touched on it, but I mean, I think kind of what Amber was talking about with like the kids are kind of they're looking for it now. I think something to consider is that like the new generation is now the young adults that kind of dominate the internet. And so I think there's kind of it's almost like a Christopher Columbus effect where they think they've all discovered something that we all watched years ago. And so I think it's kind of one of those things where they weren't present for it, and now they're finding all of these crazy things on the internet and want to tell the world, want to tell their followers all about it. Um, I also think, kind of given the political conversation that everyone has kind of mentioned, this is welcome to my TED Talk. There's always kind of a boom and bust with like the cycle of what we see in cinema, which was my entire thesis, not to get super sociological about it, but it's kind of every time we get mass exposure to like global conflict and like literally watching war crimes happen in front of us, that becomes the next generation of exploitation cinema. And then in direct response to that, we get a wave of conservatism, and then the cycle repeats. Like Vietnam was the first televised war, and then that's when we get 70s exploitation. And then, at least from like a US, as the resident American on the panel, unfortunately, that's when we get Reagan, which kind of tries to bring everyone back to family values. And then we come right back to war in the 90s, and then we get 9/11, and then we get torture porn, and then we get this new sanitized version of cinema. And I think now we're on the cusp of, you know, more global conflict, genocide. Like, I live very close to the Mexican border, and so I see ICE agents all the time. And so literally watching that happen in front of you, I think we're gonna head into the next exploitation cycle. Like, everyone keeps mentioning a Serbian film. I recently watched it, and little did I, there's certain scenes that are like the talking point whenever someone brings up like, why would you watch it? There's a couple scenes that, when I watched it a couple weeks ago, I didn't expect to then also read about it in the Epstein files. Like, almost one-to-one things happening in that film with things that are now being exposed about the government that I live under. So I think it's just it's that time again for people to start making fucked up movies.
It probably is that time again.
That's my
And I
TED
mean, we love your TED Talk. Thank you. We're beholden to your TED Talk, but it very much does feel like that time again. And I think it's been an interesting kind of time, because we haven't seen that many new extreme films kind of being released. It seems to have been a slightly quieter time, and I'm not saying I'm grateful to anything that's happening, because it will mean we'll get nastier movies, not at all. But I think it just kind of, for me, pulls it back to that point around sometimes my frustrations with how people promote extreme content and this rise in popularity. Because I think having the knowledge about why we see these cycles, like you said, Vanna, how it relates to very much kind of our culture and the landscape we're in, is really important to understanding the films, and not just going, oh, it's just made by an edgelord for shocks value. A lot of these films actually are really kind of channeling the emotions of how people are feeling, just in a quite heightened way. Which brings me nicely on to thinking about some of the tropes and almost kind of subgenres within the subgenre of extreme, and maybe calling out some of our favorites. Because I think when you look at obviously we've mentioned the disturbing iceberg, but there's also, I've seen a few like flowcharts and mind maps of all of the kind of levels that you can get into extreme, and we've mentioned a few, but I'd love to know what kind of everyone sees as these tropes that work really well in extreme and disturbing cinema. So I'm going to throw it over to you first, Bruna. Hopefully your internet works because you got cut out on the other one.
So again, I'm so sorry about that.
No need to apologize.
When it comes to tropes, I'm a big fan of anything splatter horror within that subgenre. I love anything that gets bloody and gory and just kind of all over the place. Specifically within body horror, I just think I love seeing the way that people will like take bodies and just absolutely destroy and transform them. I find it so fun to watch and so almost satisfying. It's like, when you have an itch or when you have like a little bit of skin that you just want to keep pulling back and you just kind of want to keep going at it. It's kind of that, but in a film form for me. Where it's like, I just want to keep scratching and seeing how far into the bone I can go with it. And when it comes to like disturbing and extreme films, they just do it so well to kind of keep going and to never lose focus on it and to just say, here's what you're watching, and just really ham in on it.
Do you think there's I love that, and I agree with you. It's like, I think that's one of the beauties of extreme, isn't it? Is that it's like so visceral, so violent, and often far more violent than any others. Has there been any recent kind of like films that you felt have done like splatter really well?
So I've recently, it's a short film more than a full length, but I came across a movie on YouTube called Ataraxia. It's a shot on video, very sort of low budget movie. And the guy that did it, Joe Meredith, has got a couple other films as well that he's done, and I would genuinely recommend all of them. He does such a fantastic, it's very reminiscent of that sort of like 80s splatter where it's very over the top, but he does it specifically in Ataraxia. He does such beautiful work with body and with like decomposition and transforming of bodies that I just found it so like I couldn't look away from it, and it was really refreshing as well to see. I hadn't seen anything quite like that in a while. It's not a full length, but I would recommend it, and I think Ataraxia is on YouTube. And he's got another movie, I think it's called Blood Moon or something along those lines. But if you just search it up online, they will come up.
Amazing, thank you. I'll be furiously looking for that afterwards, and I'll try to find the link after and post it in the comments section on YouTube for anyone that wants to check it out. Also helps that it's like you said, a short film. So if anyone's watching and feel like they're not quite ready to watch a feature length version of something splatterific, then that sounds like a nice starting point. Frankie, what about you? What are maybe some kind of tropes or themes within extreme that you personally get a lot out of?
I'm a big enjoyer of revenge movies when they're done well. I think they can be a little exploitative sometimes and not fantastic. But I think my favorite is probably, I love body horror. I think recently The Ugly Stepsister did body horror so incredibly well, the best that I've seen in recent years. But I think sometimes there's a little something about body horror movies that it sort of teeters on the edge of, you can still sort of tell yourself that it is very much just fiction. There's sometimes that's what it airs in reality sometimes. And there's the separation where you can definitely tell yourself it's just a movie, and there's nothing too traumatic. Obviously it can still be incredibly traumatic, but nothing too real life. I think sometimes you do need that little separation as well when you're delving into extreme stuff.
Great shout on The Ugly Stepsister. I was worried you were going to say The Substance, because that would have kicked Amber off here.
Hey, not just me. I know someone else in this chat too. I know her.
Yeah, I think body horror is a great shout, actually, especially when it comes to kind of extreme, because it's even some of the, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Frankie, but even some of the kind of like not as extreme body horrors, because it's like to do with the body, it's more intense than even like anything else. I'm not even sure that made any sense, but it's like
Yeah, no,
they're not
absolutely. I
as
think so. No, sorry, finish. Sorry, interrupted
no
you there.
no go no that's all right. I think I was finished there. I was just kind of saying like even the lesser body horror films, I think they sometimes feel more more extreme just because of what they're about.
Absolutely. I think even the way that like some diseases and stuff can be represented, like fictional diseases represented in extreme movies with body horror. Sometimes it's just things that you could never even conjure up in your own brain, could never imagine, you've never seen anything like it. So yeah, absolutely, I agree with you.
Yeah, it's very much the grotesque, and I'm sure we've all got our own things within body horror that makes us go, "Ah, that's like where the line is." Vanna, what about you? What are your kind of maybe like some of your favorite tropes and themes?
Yeah, I obviously I've talked a lot about rape revenge. That one's also once you get, I guess, deeper into the extreme, that's probably not my favorite thing to watch, but um cannibalism is something that I love watching, which sounds weird to say, but I think something about that is always so visceral, like no matter what. And it's always so like um what's the word? It's it's a lot to unpack when we're talking about cannibalism, because of like the way society consumes us, and so watching the consumption of the body in a literal sense always kind of gets under the skin. Um, I also love it as someone who doesn't eat meat. I always think it's a fun thing to usually like my meat eater friends are like a lot more squeamish about it than me. But yeah, um I love anything within like the French extremity, which does often have a lot of cannibalism in it. But yeah, I think something about those films usually just hits. It's a little different, you know?
Yeah, I think I mean I agree with you on cannibalism. I think cannibalism's a fantastic one. I mean I'm a huge Cannibal Holocaust fan. Oh, well, sometimes it feels a bit yeah, I've got my poster up there as well, which is interesting because I guess there's always a lot of commentary, isn't there, around kind of the aspect of the animal cruelty, which no one condones. But I guess I've always found it interesting to look at like I feel like I can't say much about the animal cruelty because I'm a meat eater. But I guess, from your point of view, Vanna, as someone that doesn't eat meat, do you view it differently, or like have you had much discourse on that?
Yeah, I think there was a very specific it was like a watch party with a bunch of people. It was just of the movie Fresh, so it wasn't anything wild, but that question was posed to me like, how do you feel watching this as someone who doesn't eat meat? And I was like, I mean, to me, like especially when you watch a film like that where the meat is definitely the production value on that is way different. It's interesting to me because I think like one of the big things about cannibalism in films is about the separation of human, like people as like a being on a spiritual or like a higher level than just being meat. Like I think something like Raw is a film that really hammers that in because there's a lot of scenes where maybe she's acting animalistic and then they're juxtaposed with scenes of like a horse getting surgery or something like that. And so there's a lot of that back and forth where it's posing this idea that humans are just animals. And so I think with something like Cannibal Holocaust, where especially because at that time anthropology itself was a very ethnocentric discipline, and so there's this kind of like thinking of these other humans as lesser than, but then also to then have the separation between them and animal. It just kind of exposes that hierarchy of the way we think of different people, and whether or not meat is meat and things like that. Yeah, I think it's I I think because I've had that kind of conversation with myself about meat being meat, I think that's why I love pushing that boundary with the films that I watch. Like about how you feel watching someone get eaten versus how you feel watching, like the turtle or something like that getting eaten in a film like that. It's like I always feel I do feel really bad when I see something like that, but it's kind of like that thing when people get upset at like the dog dying in a film, and it's like, okay, well, what about all the women and like all the Black people and all the queer people that died too? It's kind of, it exposes that sensitivity specifically exposes where you really land on I guess your sensitivities to watching violence enacted on people, I think. Is my point. I don't know. I kind of rambling there, but I think you get the point.
No, absolutely get the point on that one. And Issy, what about you? What's kind of, I mean, I can guess one already because we're both huge fans of it, but what's kind of some of the subgenres slash tropes in Extreme that you really like?
I love body horror, and all that sort of thing, but I think you and I have particularly bonded over New French Extremity, which is probably in extreme filmmaking, the place where my heart kind of lies, because so much of it is so packed with like purpose, whether it's political or just sociological in general. Every film I've seen is really about something and uses either its violence or the film form or how confrontational it is as a vehicle to talk to you about something. And I'm not a huge lover of films that are just kind of violent for fun. Like, I can sometimes get with it, but I can go with that. It's just what really clicks for me is when there is someone really trying to tell me. So like, it sounds so stupid, but you know what I mean. And so for me, I quite like French Extremity because of that, but also because of the focus of women in the movement, which we've talked about in the article that we did for Culture. And it's really bizarre because I know that women front lots of spaces like rape revenge and things like that, but in New French Extremity, a lot of the kind of experiences in the films aren't necessarily more likely to happen to women. The film just kind of choose to have a lot of female protagonists. And so when we were talking about the Umbrella box set that they put out, it's it's all female protagonists and a lot of male directors, but they still are choosing to have these women. Oh, I want one so bad. But they're still choosing to have all these women, and I think that's really, really awesome. And a lot of the films do touch on women's issues. I know that sexual assault is a huge, huge thing in New French Extremity, but then you also have all these films which are completely void of that sort of thing that just happen to have women. So, watching something like Martyrs, it's not really rape revenge or anything. But there's all these female protagonists in all these films, and it's really cool to be able to see that. So a favorite of mine is Frontiers, and you've got the kind of final girl thing, and you've got all this political stuff going on about the right wing and the rise of the right wing in France at the time and the protests. So you've got all this wonderful, rich context going on to really fuel this story, and then it ends up being focused on this woman, and she's shown as a victim of the right wing because she gets chosen as a kind of like breeder type for this family who need her for procreation. So it does touch on those issues, but ultimately it doesn't define her in any way. Martyrs isn't like that. And yeah, so it's really interesting because I love the way that New French Extremity has so many women that also aren't defined by distinctly like female issues. There's like plenty that are, of course, with lots of sexual assault and lots of discrimination, which are also fantastic and powerful films. But I also love that there's some where they are just women existing, then going through these violent scenarios, and most of the time coming out on top. I think that's quite enjoyable to watch sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me is why I also love New French Extremity, because you've got actually very strong female characters, and looking at across kind of extreme, often women are, and more often than not, a lot of the extreme films are fairly misogynistic. Women are tortured. They ain't having a nice time. And at least in New French Extremity, a lot of them are kind of coming out fairly on top. They're still having a rough as hell time, but at least it feels slightly more progressive, which is where we want, kind of extreme to go. And Amber, what about you? I know you like some of the more obscure niche things.
Yeah, I'm gonna mention two subgenres that are kind of subgenres, more like cultural genres that I think get overlooked a lot when we talk about disturbing horror. One is I love the Hong Kong Category 3 films. Zoe, I know you love these two things like Red to Kill, The Untold Story, Ebola Syndrome, Centipede Horror, which is fucking foul. If you want truly, truly tasteless films, get on Category 3 films. These are some of the nastiest, cruelest films that you will ever see, but they have this incredibly fucked up sense of humor running through them. Like Ebola Syndrome is just, I can't.
It's hilarious. I'm sorry.
So
it's absolutely
funny. It's
hilarious.
Evil. It's pure evil in like every way. I cannot recommend it for anyone of a sensitive constitution at all. But they don't shy away from anything, and it's a really good snapshot into like anti-censorship at that time. In East Asia. And speaking of East Asia, of course, I wouldn't be me if I didn't bring up a Japanese film movement. So something I've seen people start to get into more recently, because they're getting these restorations from people like Vinegar Syndrome, is the Japanese pink industry, especially from the 90s. If anyone's not familiar with the pink films, in the 90s especially, I really like the directors like Hisayasu Sato and Takahisa Zizi. These are very graphic sex films. They are not porn because they are simulated sex, but they are very graphic sex films. But they're also a lot of them are incredibly gory, incredibly voyeuristic. They touch on these very nihilistic topics, talking a lot about situations in Japan in the 90s with the economic collapse and kind of changing female how women were seen in society at that time. In my opinion, they're not sexy, but they are graphic. And yeah, they thank God for people like labels like Vinegar Syndrome, because they're getting them out there. But again, those are two, like, we do I think when we talk about extreme horror, we do tend to kind of focus on the more Western side of it, like the New French Extremity movements, and obviously the torture porn, which I know isn't the right term to use, but I personally think that, if you want to go really fucked up, you go to Asia, baby. You go straight to Asia.
I'm so glad you mentioned Ebola Syndrome, because I've been trying to get someone to watch that for years, and everyone's like, that sounds horrible.
Horrible
Yeah, which
horrible. Love it.
I mean, that's
Absolutely
what you want.
Amazing.
I think for me, I really love found footage when it comes to extreme, because I think it really simulates that aspect of going back to what we were talking about earlier, about being on the depths of the internet. I feel like I've stumbled down the dark web. I love films like August Underground, which I know gets a lot of hate, but also it's its 25th birthday anniversary this year. So if you haven't watched it, it could be time this year. I think for me, Extreme is so well done when it comes to found footage, because you can just do it dirty, cheaply. You can smell the film. It's really grimy. And then the other kind of trope I really like is just like bleak, like the bleakest shit you can think of. I watched a film called Nothing Bad Can Happen, and I honestly was just like, wow, okay, cool. I will just jump off my balcony. Honestly,
Some
it
bad
was
things can happen.
awful, very, those films like that. You've got Come and See, you've got Snowtown, just where you just go, right, well, I kind of hate my life. So yeah, there's plenty to explore when it comes to Extreme. So we are running over, but I really want to get our quick recommendations before we go. I mean, clearly we've got a lot to talk about, disturbing films. So I'd love to ask everyone to just kind of share like 3 to 5 recommendations that they believe people should go away and watch at their own peril. We're giving full kind of content warnings on all of these. We are not responsible for you having a breakdown, ruining your life, or having the FBI knock on your door. That's not our problem. Please don't come for us. So I'm gonna go to you first, Bruna.
Right, I'll try to get these out rapid fire then. As the representative for the Duck Film Club, we only do like foreign films, so all of mine are international films. So if you're into that kind of thing, Itchy the Killer is my top #1 recommendation. I love that movie so much. It's what made me fall in love with extreme films. Mermaid in a Manhole, which is part of the Guinea Pig series. It's number like 5, I think. Absolutely fantastic, hidden in the middle of those maybe less fantastic films. When Evil Lurks, which is amazing. It absolutely blew my mind. I can't recommend it enough. And then I would do The Eyes of My Mother, which is a Portuguese-American film. And it's beautiful to watch. And it's also so messed up. And as a Portuguese person, we don't have a lot of movies that make it big. So to be able to have one that I love that is also extreme makes me so proud. So I'll bring it up whenever I can.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
What I've got.
Amazing. Thank you, Bruna. Amazing recommendations. And yeah, When Evil Lurks, I think probably, I mean, that the dog scene, if you haven't seen it, that's never, I look at my dog in a different way since that movie. Like any moment it could be off on a bad one. Issy, what about you?
I don't have a prepared list, but I think for me, the one I recommend to everyone, like I mentioned, is Frontiers, because it is a good segue into this sort of thing if you're not totally used to it, because it's not got loads of sexual assault in it, which a lot of people find very difficult, and it's not super intense on the other stuff. So I think it's a good way to get into New French Extremity and stuff, and it's just fantastic. I think it's amazing. So everyone should watch Frontiers. Probably less extreme, but I would watch something like Funny Games. I'm showing it at my uni next week because it is, a commentary on the kind of ethics of watching filmic violence. And so I think if you watch that, it kind of makes you think about why you're watching what you're watching. Are you participating in any way through your spectatorship? And I would suggest that to anyone. I don't think that Haneke is considered an extreme filmmaker, but I would suggest, if you fancy bleak films, watching Funny Games or The Piano Teacher or something. Salo, I know everyone says it. But it's an essential because it is so challenging, but it is just fantastic. And I think it's a really good piece to look at in terms of film form and how we can structure meaning through shot sizes and sequences. I think that film is made by its technique more so than what happens or the content, because that really constructs how it's showing what it's showing and what meaning it creates through that, and the kind of observational qualities of it at points. So I know everyone says it, but it is an essential and very relevant today. And I don't know if it's particularly considered totally extreme, but probably my favorite movie ever is Possession. And I know that that has some parts of it where it's not an extreme film, but it's a classic disturbing movie. It's on every disturbing movie list, and now it's kind of available everywhere. It seems like it's on Prime and every Blu-ray company has it, which is fantastic that it's finally getting its flowers. But I would totally check that out if you haven't, because it's a bad time. It's a really bad time, but it's fantastic. So I think off the top of my head, those are the ones that I would go for instantly, that I would just suggest to people, I think.
Great choices, very good choices. Frankie, what about you?
It's funny that you mentioned Nothing Bad Can Happen earlier. I actually wrote that down and then crossed it out because I wasn't sure if I wanted to recommend it to people.
Well, recommend away.
I have The Sadness. I thought that was a really good modern take on, in my opinion, what's been done quite a lot already. Eden Lake, I think, is a classic disturbing movie. I think is one that left me with a lot of heavy feelings when I was younger that I've carried into adulthood. And The Skin I Live In, I think, is one that doesn't get mentioned very much. But again, I feel is so disturbing that it sticks with you.
Thank you. Yeah, really, really good picks. And I'm glad someone else knew about Nothing Bad Can Happen, because I've not really heard many people talking about that. So glad that we've got
It's a horrible movie.
common. It's truly evil. Vanna, what about you?
Oh man. Okay. It's hard to recommend some of these, but obviously with all the content warnings, all that, I do think I would recommend a Serbian film because of the conversation we had today, kind of along the same lines as Sallow, where I think it is actually really important. Like I said, especially with everything that's going on right now. I think while, like I said, it does come with a big content warning, there is something to say about whether or not you can stomach those things being simulated versus like reading about the same exact things in your news cycle. So yeah, I think politically it's super important. I also, especially because we talked about cannibalism, I think Cannibal Holocaust is a good film to kind of really dip your toes into the iceberg, so to speak. I think there's just a huge conversation around it. It's one of those films that is like not just for the sake of violence, but something that can really get you thinking. Something that is really just for the shock of it all. If you really want to ruin your day, I know August Underground was mentioned. I would say if you really want to be the saddest, I think Mortem is if you really want to be really sad, that's the one that gets me sad. It's not really even the violence that sticks out in that one. It's it's the sadness. I think Irreversible is also something that, again, hard to watch, but I think it's doing so much with the rape revenge narrative that it's a really interesting conversation to have. I know the what's it called? The reverse cut was released, but the original cut is I think much more valuable because of how intentional the the time sequencing is. And then I think one other thing, because to get into a little body horror, something that I think doesn't really get talked about enough is the Natomorphose. I think I hate having a body, and it's kind of an interesting interpretation of the effects of sexual assault and things like that. So yeah, I think it's one that I don't really see in the disturbing conversation so often that I would offer up.
Great shout on Thanatomorphose. It is, yeah, it's I think it's by French filmmaker Eric Faladou. Great shout, very underseen, and yeah, will make you highly disgusted at your own body. And last but not least, Amber.
I'm going to run through these. If you get offended, I'm sorry. Content warning for everything. I take no responsibility. I'm going to start with Visitor Q by Takashi Miike. I started rewatching this yesterday, forgot that my curtains were open. I forgot that it starts with father-daughter incest. This film has everything. It has shit, piss, blood, milk, drugs, assault. But it's also a really sharp takedown of like Japanese domesticity and the malevolence that was hiding in like Japanese society at this time. Everyone talks about the other Miike films, of course, but Visitor Q is up there. Next, I gotta recommend the Guts trilogy by a Japanese director called Gaira. I particularly recommend Guts of a Virgin, which I describe as Ty West's X, but for actual perverts. You can see by the art there, we're not holding back on anything. Graphic sex, gore, violence. Great sense of humor in there as well. Extreme horror is such a boys' club that I wanted to give a shout out to Kei Fujiwara, who is a Japanese director who directed this film called Organ. She was the cinematographer on Shinya Tsukamoto's Tetsuo the Iron Man, and she created the infamous drill dick in that. So, she's got the chops. This isn't the most coherent movie in the world, I wouldn't say, but it's very overlooked. It's very Cronenbergian, lots of organ harvesting, lots of goo, lots of splatter, and it also has that really 90s like lo-fi grime to it. So yeah, Organ by Kei Fujiwara. Next, this one was mentioned, but I love it, is The Sadness by Rob Jabaz. This is maybe the most extreme mainstream horror that we've seen in recent years, and I say mainstream because it played at major festivals, and I believe it's on Shudder. But for this film to get a Shudder release is quite the ticket, because this is like, again, very extreme. What I love about The Sadness is it feels really cruel. There's none of that like, it's not pandering to anyone. It's like, if you want to be fucked up, then The Sadness will. But again, I'm content warning, please. And then I mentioned a little bit earlier about the Pink films of Hisayasu Sato, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Vinegar Syndrome box sets, because it really is a miracle that these films exist. Like, I can't express this enough, particularly the films Lust Mord, and then the later remake of that by Sato, Naked Blood, which you may have heard of. I believe it's on that iceberg. But I think Sato is a name that way more extreme horror fans need to be familiar with. He has this reputation, again, with these sex movies, but Naked Blood is one of the goriest movies I've ever seen. If you're into like auto cannibalism, that personally, that's the thing that fucks me up the most, is like eating other people's fine. I don't care. Like, you can do that. I'm never going to eat myself. That's just not going to happen. That's not on my agenda. But yeah, Naked Blood is a great film. And yeah, if you want to watch these films that, again, push these boundaries of how far the body can go, then yeah, Sato and the Pink films will see you right.
Thank you, Amber, for some awful, horrible movie picks, and thank you everyone for all of their recommendations. I will add a quick couple, and then I'll get you all to let everyone know where they can find you. So, my top pick was going to be a Serbian film as well, because I'm always pushing that film as hard as I can. Atroz a very, very nasty found footage film, which I struggle to even watch myself. But if you want something absolutely horrific, Atruz is the one. Necromantic, you can't beat Necromantic. Also Necromantic 2, you know, it's right here. I love it. It's beautiful. It's not even that depraved, in my personal opinion. We've already mentioned August Underground, so I won't say that one. I've got to give a shout out to one of my favorites, which is Tumbling Dole of Flesh. Again, another kind of found footage. Just, I think when I first reviewed it, my review was every hole's a goal, and I stand by that through and through. Then there's Snowtown, which again is like my catharsis film. I'll watch that when I'm feeling down, even though it is just everyone's like, please stop recommending that. And then I'm going to recommend a film that Amber made me watch and I'll never watch again, and that is Kyoto, which was just frankly horrific. So thank you, Amber, for that one, because
Anytime.
horrible. Right, we've got to head off. We've overrun, but clearly we had a lot of recommendations to get through, so I'm going to quickly ask everyone, where can people find you? Amber?
You find me on Instagram, Hornbloodfire, on Blue Sky, Blonde Kaidan, and I would be just want to quickly shout out Fangoria magazine is now on sale in the UK. Everyone's been asking for this for years, so get out there and get one and support print media.
Woo! Thank you. Vanna?
Yeah, you can find me pretty much any social media, Instagram, whatever, even TikTok, Letterboxd, everything is Siren Death Cult. And then you can find my writing on Movie John and Ghouls and all that.
Thank you very much. We've unfortunately just lost Frankie, but Frankie is over on Ghouls magazine, and I believe her handle is @FigPud. I could be incorrect, but I'll put that in the show notes after this so you can make sure that you are following Frankie. Issy, where can people find you? Issy?
So I can't hear you anymore for some reason. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, if you can hear me, that's fine. So you can find me on Instagram. It's just Izzy Charlie Dennis at the moment, and Culture's Instagram is Culture Film Publication. It's the same on TikTok, and yeah, that's pretty much where you can find all of my stuff.
Thank you. And finally, Bruna.
Yeah, so my personal Instagram is root_rosa. It's the same thing on Letterboxd, and the film club I hop run is on Instagram, Dead Duck Film Club. And if you want more, I'm sure you can find a way to stalk me.
Thank you so much. We have another we have a pre-recorded podcast happening in 3 minutes now. There was going to be a break, but you're straight into the next one. That is called A Bloody Threesome. It's Ghouls crossed over with Not Another Teen Pod and Tainted Love, talking about Lisa Frankenstein. So do go and watch that. That is on our YouTube. And thank you so much. Hopefully you all go and ruin the rest of your day and the rest of your weekend with our recommendations. Bye.